The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in floating chairs that circled a central platform. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all and existed only as clouds of glowing energy. They had gathered here for one purpose. They were going to decide if humanity would live or die. High Arbiter Zelthos stood at the center of the platform. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that burned with ancient fire. He had lived for over 6,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched stars be born and die. And he had ordered the destruction of 3 young species who had shown themselves to be threats to galactic peace. Today, he would likely order a 4th. "The evidence is clear," said Vreth, the tactical coordinator. Vreth belonged to a species that looked like giant insects. His voice clicked and buzzed as he spoke. "The humans have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They have used these weapons against each other. They have poisoned their own air and water. Their radio signals have been leaking into space for over a century, and those signals show constant war, hatred, and division." Zelthos nodded slowly. He had reviewed the evidence himself many times. The humans were a young species, barely 100,000 years old. They had only recently developed technology advanced enough to be noticed by the rest of the galaxy. And what the galaxy had noticed was troubling. "Show them the recording," Zelthos said. A massive hologram appeared above the platform. It showed a human city, beautiful and bright, filled with tall buildings and busy streets. Then a blinding flash of light appeared. When the light faded, the city was gone. Only ash and ruin remained. The recording had been captured from space over 80 years ago. The humans called it Hiroshima. The council members watched in silence. Many of them had seen similar recordings before. Young species often discovered the power of the atom before they learned wisdom. That was why they rarely survived. They have built thousands more of these weapons since then, Vreth continued. They point them at each other constantly. Our analysts believe it is only a matter of time before they use them again. And if they survive long enough to develop faster than light travel, they will bring this violence to the rest of the galaxy. A murmur passed through the council. The memory of the Kreth War was still fresh, even though it had ended 10,000 years ago. A young and violent species had been allowed to spread beyond their homeworld. By the time they were stopped, they had destroyed over 200 inhabited planets. Billions had died. The council had sworn never to let such a thing happen again. "I move that we authorize immediate cleansing," said one of the council members, a being made entirely of crystalline light. "The humans are too dangerous to be allowed to exist." "Seconded," said another voice, and then another and another. Zelthos raised his hand for silence. The hall fell quiet. "Is there anyone who speaks against this motion?" he asked. For a long moment, no one answered. Then a soft voice rose from the far side of the hall. "I do." Everyone turned to look. The speaker was Councillor Itha of the Volanthi. She was small compared to most council members, with silver skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold great sadness. Her people were ancient, almost as old as Zelthos himself. They were known for their wisdom and compassion. "The Volanthi were almost destroyed once," Etha said. "Long ago, before many of you were born. We were young and foolish. We made weapons that could crack planets. We fought wars that scarred our entire solar system. If the Council then had followed the same rules we follow now, my people would not exist." "That was different," Vreth said. "Your species showed signs of potential. The humans show only violence. Do they?" Etha asked. "Or do we only see their violence because that is what we look for?" No one answered. Aetha continued. We intercept their loudest signals. We see their wars and their weapons and their conflicts. But we do not see what happens in the quiet moments. We do not see how they treat each other when no one is watching. Perhaps we should look more closely before we destroy an entire species. Zelthos considered her words. He respected Aetha. She had argued against cleansing before, and sometimes she had been right. But she had also been wrong. And when she was wrong, the consequences had been terrible. The motion has been made and seconded, he said finally. We will vote. The vote was not close. Over 90% of the council voted in favor of cleansing. Only a handful of species abstained. Only the Valanthi voted against. Zelthos closed his burning eyes for a moment. Then he spoke the words that would doom an entire world. The motion carries. I hereby authorize the deployment of the cleansing fleet. 17 warships will proceed to the human homeworld. They will arrive in 47 standard cycles. Upon arrival, they will begin orbital bombardment followed by atmospheric sterilization. No humans will survive. The council hall was silent. Even those who had voted for destruction did not celebrate. Ending a species was never a joyful thing. It was simply necessary. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet that circled them, ordinary yellow star, humanity continued its ordinary existence. In a small observatory in New Mexico, a young astronomer named Danny Ortiz was working the late shift. He sat alone in the control room, surrounded by screens that showed images of distant stars and galaxies. He was searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. He had been searching for 7 years. He had never found anything. His colleague Maria Santos walked in with 2 cups of coffee. She was older than Danny, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes. She had been searching even longer than he had. Anything interesting tonight? She asked, handing him a cup. Danny shook his head. Same as always, nothing but empty space. Maria sat down next to him and looked at the screens. Somewhere out there, she believed, there had to be other beings. The universe was too vast and too old to contain only one intelligent species. But if they existed, they were very good at hiding. She had no way of knowing that they were not hiding at all. She had no way of knowing that thousands of species filled the galaxy, organized into a vast council that had existed for millions of years. She had no way of knowing that this council had just voted to wipe humanity from existence. She simply sipped her coffee and watched the stars, unaware that among those distant lights, 17 warships were already beginning their long journey toward Earth. Counselor Aetha could not sleep. She lay in her quarters aboard her personal ship, the Whisper of Dawn, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the council's decision. In 47 cycles, 8 billion humans would die. Men, women, children, all of them turned to ash because the galaxy had decided they were too dangerous to exist. She had seen this happen before. She had watched 3 other species be erased from the universe. Each time, she had told herself it was necessary. Each time, she had tried to believe that the council knew best. But each time, a small voice in her heart had whispered that something was wrong. Tonight, that voice was louder than ever. She got up from her bed and walked to the control room of her ship. The Whisper of Dawn was small, built for diplomacy rather than war. It had no weapons. It had no shields. But it was fast, and it carried some of the most advanced observation equipment in the galaxy. Aetha made a decision that could end her career and possibly her life. She programmed her ship to intercept the cleansing fleet's path and then diverted a small observation probe toward Earth. The probe was barely larger than a human fist, but it could capture and transmit enormous amounts of data. If the council found out what she was doing, they would charge her with interfering in a sanctioned operation. The punishment was exile to the void between galaxies, where she would drift alone until her ship's power ran out, and she froze in the darkness. she did it anyway. The probe arrived at Earth 3 cycles later. It settled into a high orbit and began scanning the planet below. It captured radio signals, television broadcasts, and digital communications. It recorded everything and sent it all back to Etha's ship. For the first 2 days, Etha watched in growing despair. She saw news broadcasts filled with violence, wars in distant countries, politicians shouting at each other, crime and corruption, and endless conflict. She saw entertainment programs that celebrated cruelty and competition. She saw advertisements that encouraged greed and selfishness. Perhaps the council was right, she thought. Perhaps humans really were too dangerous. On the 3rd day, something changed. The probe intercepted a transmission from a city called Chicago. It came from a building that the humans called a hospital, a place where they cared for their sick and injured. The transmission was a news report about a young boy named Tyler. Tyler was 5 years old. He had a rare disease of the blood. Without a special kind of transfusion, he would die within days. The problem was that Tyler's blood type was extremely rare. Only a few humans in every 1,000 had blood that could help him. The hospital had sent out a message asking for help. They had broadcasted on television and radio and through the strange digital networks that humans use to communicate. Etha watched what happened next with growing amazement. Within hours, over 200 humans arrived at the hospital. They came from all over the city. Some drove for hours. Some took time off from their jobs. Some brought their children with them. They lined up in the hallway and waited patiently for their turn to be tested. Most of them did not have the right blood type. They could not help Tyler directly, but they gave their blood anyway, knowing it would help someone else. And they stayed, waiting and hoping in case they might somehow be useful. One woman caught Etha's attention. Her name was Nina Reyes. She was a cleaning worker at a factory. She had 3 children of her own and barely enough money to feed them. She had never met Tyler. She would never meet him. But she had seen the news report and had immediately left work to come to the hospital. "Why are you here?" a reporter asked her. Nina looked confused by the question. "A little boy is sick," she said, as if the answer was obvious. "Maybe I can help." She could not help. Her blood type was wrong. But she hugged Tyler's mother before she left and promised to pray for him. Etha did not fully understand what prayer meant to humans, but she understood the gesture. A complete stranger had traveled across a city to offer her body and her hope to a child. She would never know, and she was not alone. 200 others had done the same thing. Etha began searching for more examples. She adjusted the probe's filters to look for stories like Tyler's. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about humanity. In a place called Florida, a man named Carlos Vega had heard cries for help during a flood. He had swum through dangerous water to reach a car that was sinking. Inside were 2 children he had never met. He pulled them out and carried them to safety, one under each arm. When the water pulled him under, he held the children above his head so they could breathe. He nearly drowned saving strangers. In a city called Boston, a woman named Linda Park had seen an old man collapse on the street. Everyone else walked past, too busy with their own lives. Linda stopped. She knelt beside him and held his hand. She called for help. She stayed with him until the medical workers arrived. She visited him in the hospital every day for a week. Even though she did not know his name. In a country called Japan, after a terrible disaster had destroyed entire cities, humans from all over the world had sent help. They sent money. They sent supplies. They sent doctors and builders and volunteers. They helped people they would never meet, in a country they would never visit, simply because those people were suffering. Etha watched all of this with tears streaming down her silver face. She had looked for evidence that humans were more than monsters. She had found something far greater. She had found a species that was capable of extraordinary love. Not all humans were like this, of course. Some were cruel and selfish. Some committed terrible acts. But alongside the darkness, there was light. And the light was everywhere, hidden in quiet moments that never made the news, in small kindnesses that no one recorded. The council had looked at humanity and seen only the darkness. They had made their judgment based on wars and weapons and hatred, but they had not seen Nina Reyes hugging a stranger's mother. They had not seen Carlos Vega holding children above the flood. They had not seen Linda Park holding an old man's hand. Etha realized she had to show them. She had to make them see what she had seen. She set a course to intercept the cleansing fleet. She did not know if they would listen. She did not know if she could change their minds. But she knew she had to try. 8 billion lives depended on it. Afa spent the next 15 cycles gathering evidence. She barely slept. She barely ate. She sat in the control room of her ship and watched humanity with eyes that grew wider every day. The probe continued to send transmissions from Earth. Thousands of hours of footage. Millions of words. Stories that made her weep with sadness and stories that made her weep with joy. She organized everything into a single massive file, a testament to what humanity truly was. She found a firefighter named Jake Marino in a city called Los Angeles. His job was to run into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. He'd been doing this for 20 years. He had saved over 300 lives. He had burned scars on his arms and back from times when the fire had caught him. But he kept going back. One recording showed him carrying an unconscious woman down a ladder while flames roared behind him. His helmet had melted. His coat was on fire. But he did not let go of the woman. He did not stop until she was safe. A reporter asked him afterward why he did such dangerous work. Jake shrugged, like the question made no sense. Someone has to, he said. Might as well be me. Etha did not understand this answer at first. In her experience, beings acted out of self-interest. They helped others to gain rewards or avoid punishment. They formed alliances for mutual benefit. But Jake Marino gained nothing from his work except pain and danger. He did it anyway because someone had to. She found a nurse named Connie Blaine in a city called Detroit. During a terrible outbreak of disease, Connie worked triple shifts at her hospital. She held the hands of dying patients when their families could not visit. She sang songs to frighten children. She cleaned and fed and comforted hundreds of people who were suffering. Then she caught the disease herself. She was sick for 3 weeks. The moment she recovered, she went back to work. There are people who need help, she told a friend who begged her to rest. How can I rest when there are people who need help? She did not ask for extra pay. She did not ask for recognition. She simply could not bear to be comfortable while others suffered. Etha found a man named Pete Dawson in a small town in Texas. Pete had only 1 kidney. He had been born with 2, like most humans, but he had given one away. He had donated it to a complete stranger he had found through something called the internet. The stranger was a young woman named Heather, who was dying of kidney failure. She had been on a waiting list for years. Her family was poor. They had no connections. She was running out of time. Pete had never met Heather. He lived on the other side of the country. But he read her story online and decided to help. He flew across the nation, let doctors cut open his body, and gave away a piece of himself so that a stranger could live. The surgery was painful. The recovery took months. Pete could never drink alcohol again. He had to be careful about his health for the rest of his life. But when a reporter asked if he regretted his decision, he laughed. Heather's alive, he said. She got to see her kids grow up. That's worth more than anything I gave up. Etha watched this recording over and over. She could not understand how a being could make such a sacrifice for someone they did not know. In the council species, organ donation happened only between close family members, and even then, it was rare. The idea of giving part of your body to a stranger was unthinkable, but humans did it all the time. Thousands of them every year. She found stories of humans who ran into traffic to save injured dogs. Humans who spent their life savings to feed hungry strangers. Humans who traveled to dangerous parts of the world to teach children or build houses or provide medicine. Humans who adopted children that no one else wanted. Humans who forgave people who had hurt them terribly. And the strangest thing was that most of these humans did not consider themselves special. They did not think they were heroes. They thought they were just doing what anyone would do. But Ethan knew that was not true. She had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. She had never seen anything like this. Most beings helped their families and friends. Some helped their communities or their nations. A few helped their entire species. But humans helped everyone. They helped strangers. They helped enemies. They helped other species entirely, protecting animals and plants that could never repay them. They seemed to believe that all life had value, that all suffering mattered, that all beings deserved compassion. This was not the behavior of monsters. This was not the behavior of a threat that needed to be destroyed. This was something beautiful. Etha finished compiling her evidence and began preparing her transmission. She knew the fleet would not want to listen. Zelthos had made his decision. The council had voted. Changing their minds would require more than just showing them footage. She would need to make them feel what she had felt. She selected the most powerful stories, the ones that showed humanity at its best, the ones that made her believe, for the first time in centuries, that the universe might actually be a good place. She organized them carefully, building from small kindnesses to great sacrifices. She wanted the fleet to understand that these were not rare exceptions. She wanted them to see that compassion was woven into the very fabric of human existence. When she finished, the transmission was 7 hours long. She checked her navigation systems. The cleansing fleet was still 12 cycles away from Earth. She would intercept them in 3 cycles if she pushed her engines to maximum. She took a deep breath and engaged the engines. The whisper of dawn shot forward through the darkness of space, carrying the hope of 8 billion souls. Etha did not know if she would succeed. She did not know if the fleet would even let her speak. But she had seen too much now. She had seen the light that burned in human hearts. She would make them see it too. The cleansing fleet moved through space like a swarm of metal beasts. 17 warships, each one large enough to carry a small city. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could withstand the heat of a star. They had been built for one purpose only, to end civilizations that the Council deemed too dangerous to exist. High Arbiter Zelthos stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the stars drift past. He had commanded cleansing fleets before. He knew what was coming. In a few more cycles, they would reach the human homeworld. They would take up positions in orbit. And then they would fire. The planet would burn. The oceans would boil away. The atmosphere would be stripped off and scattered into space. 8 billion humans would die in a matter of hours. Most of them would never know what happened. They would simply be there one moment and gone the next. Zelthos felt no joy at this thought. He was not cruel. He did not hate humans. He simply believed that some species were too dangerous to be allowed to grow. The evidence supported this belief. Humans had nuclear weapons. They had wars. They had shown every sign of becoming a threat to galactic peace. The decision had been made. The vote had been taken. There was nothing more to discuss. Then his communications officer spoke. Arbiter, we are receiving a signal. A small ship is approaching on an intercept course. Zelthos frowned. Identify it. It appears to be the Whisper of Dawn, sir. Counselor Atha's diplomatic vessel. Zelthos felt a flash of annoyance. The Volanthi counselor had voted against the cleansing. She had argued for mercy. He had expected her to accept the council's decision gracefully, as she always had before. Instead, she had followed them. "Open a channel," he commanded. Etha's face appeared on the main view screen. She looked tired. Her silver skin was pale, and her dark eyes were red from lack of sleep. But there was something in her expression that Zelthos had never seen before. A kind of desperate determination. "Hi, Arbiter," she said. "I request permission to address the fleet." "The Council has already decided," Zelthos replied. "There is nothing more to discuss." "Please," Etha said. "I have gathered new evidence. Evidence that the Council did not consider. I ask only that you watch it before you proceed. If you still believe the cleansing is justified after you have seen what I have seen, I will not interfere." Zelthos considered refusing. The decision had been made. Protocols were clear, but something in Eda's eyes made him hesitate. She was not a foolish being. She would not have followed them across the galaxy for nothing. "Very well," he said finally. "Transmit your evidence. The fleet will watch." Etha bowed her head. "Thank you, Arbiter." The transmission began. It started small. A human woman giving food to a homeless man on a street corner. A child sharing her toys with a friend who had none. A stranger helping an old man carry his bags up a flight of stairs. Simple kindnesses. Ordinary moments. Zelthos watched with little interest. These were insignificant gestures. They proved nothing, but the transmission continued. And the stories grew larger. He saw Jake Moreno carrying a woman through flames. He saw Connie Blaine holding the hands of dying patients. He saw Pete Dawson giving away part of his body to save a stranger. He saw Nina Rizzers traveling across a city to help a child she would never meet. He saw Carlos Vega nearly drowning to save children he did not know. Hour after hour, the stories came. Humans running into danger to save others. Humans giving away their time and their money and their blood and their organs. Humans forgiving those who had hurt them. Humans fighting to protect animals and forests and rivers. Humans building schools and hospitals in places where they would never live. Humans adopting children that no one else wanted. The fleet watched in silence. 17 warships filled with soldiers who had been trained to destroy, sat motionless in space and watched a species love each other. Near the end of the transmission, a single story appeared. It was from a place called Oklahoma in the aftermath of a terrible storm. A man named Bobby Tran stood in the ruins of his home. Everything he owned had been destroyed. His furniture, his photographs, his memories, all swept away by the wind. A reporter approached him. "Sir, you have lost everything. How are you feeling?" Bobby looked at the camera. His face was covered in dirt. His clothes were torn. He had nothing left. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. "We are alive," he said. "My family is alive. My neighbors are alive. And we will help each other rebuild. That is what matters." Behind him, other humans were already at work. Strangers had come from miles away to help clear the debris and search for survivors. They brought food and water and blankets. They did not ask for payment. They did not ask for thanks. They simply helped because help was needed. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the fleet spoke. The bridge of the flagship was completely silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade away. Then Zelthos spoke. His voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper. "Hold position." His officers looked at him in surprise. "Sir?" "Hold position," Zelthos repeated. "All ships. We go no further until I say otherwise." He turned away from the view screen and walked to his private chambers. He needed to think. He needed to understand what he had just seen. For 300 years, he had believed that young species were defined by their capacity for destruction. He had believed that violence was the true measure of a civilization. He had believed that the only way to protect the galaxy was to eliminate threats before they could grow. But the humans did not measure themselves by their capacity for destruction. They measured themselves by something else entirely. They measured themselves by how much they could love. Zelthos sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in centuries, he did not know what to do. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere among them, a small blue planet continued to spin, its people unaware that their fate hung in the balance. 5 years had passed as the humans left Council space. 5 years that changed everything. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a pale shadow of what it had once been. Only 6 species remained as members. The others had drifted away, some joining the Terran Confederacy as trade partners, others simply fading into isolation and silence. The great chamber where the vote had happened now felt empty, its seats half filled, its power broken. High Chancellor Vexthari was gone. He had been removed from office 3 years earlier, blamed for the catastrophe that his arrogance had caused. Now he lived in quiet disgrace on a small moon far from the centers of power, watching the galaxy transform without him. The new High Chancellor was Zarathul of the Nelani, the one who had warned them all so long ago. She had taken the position not because she wanted it, but because someone had to try to save what remained. Every day was a struggle. Every decision was a choice between bad options and worse ones, but there was hope. Slim, fragile, uncertain hope. The Terran Confederacy had agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Council. They would not return to their old role, but they were willing to talk, to trade, to negotiate. It was not friendship. It was not alliance. But it was something. Today, Zarathul stood in the rebuilt Council chamber, waiting to receive the first official Terran ambassador since the expulsion. The remaining Council members sat around her, nervous and uncertain. They knew how much depended on this moment. The doors opened, and Ambassador Linda Hayes walked in. She looked different from the woman who had stood in this chamber 5 years ago. Listening to the Council cast her people out. The sadness was still there, hidden deep in her eyes. But there was strength too, confidence, the quiet power of someone who had faced the worst and survived. Behind her walked Admiral Daniel Brooks, now the commander of the entire Terran fleet. He had aged well, his gray hair making him look distinguished rather than old. His eyes swept the chamber, taking in every detail, missing nothing. "Ambassador Hayes," Zarathul said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you." "Thank you, High Chancellor." Linda's voice was polite, professional. "The Terran Confederacy appreciates this opportunity to establish better relations between our peoples." The negotiations took 3 days. They covered trade agreements, border protocols, mutual defense arrangements, and 100 other details that would shape the future relationship between humans and the Council. Both sides bargained hard, but fairly. There were disagreements, compromises, and moments of tension. But in the end, they reached an agreement that it was not alliance. It was not the old relationship restored, but it was a beginning. On the final day, Zarathul asked to speak with Linda privately. They met in a small room overlooking the stars, just 2 women who had lived through historic times. "I want to thank you," Zarathul said quietly, "for being willing to try this. Many in your government wanted nothing to do with us. Many still feel that way," Linda admitted. "The wounds have not healed. They may never heal completely, but holding on to anger is exhausting, and it does not help anyone." "We were fools," Zarathul said. "We did not understand what we had until it was gone." Linda was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "You know what surprised me most about leaving?" It was not the hardship or the danger or the uncertainty. It was the freedom. For the first time, we did not have to ask permission. We did not have to justify ourselves. We just did what needed to be done, and look what you built. Zarathal's glowing skin flickered with something like admiration. The Terran Confederacy is amazing. Your technology advances faster than ours ever did. Your colonies are thriving. Your people seem happy in a way I do not see in Council space anymore. We had something to prove, Linda said with a slight smile. Nothing motivates humans like being told they cannot do something. Far away, in the heart of Terran space, Admiral Daniel Brooks stood on the observation deck of the newest human achievement, the Gateway. It was a massive ring of metal and energy, floating in space near the edge of the Confederacy's territory. Scientists had worked on it for 3 years, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Today, it would open for the first time, creating a passage to another galaxy entirely. Ready, Admiral? His first officer, a young woman named Catherine Park, stood beside him. Ready. Daniel looked around at the gathered crowd. Thousands of people had come to witness this moment. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, politicians. Children born in the Confederacy who had never known Council space. Old veterans who remembered the evacuation like it was yesterday. This is Admiral Brooks to all ships, he said into the communication system. Today, we take the next step in humanity's journey. We have crossed oceans. We have crossed the void between stars. Now we cross the gulf between galaxies. Not because anyone gave us permission. Not because anyone said we could. But because that is what humans do. We explore. We discover. We reach for things that seem impossible and make them real. He paused, letting the words sink in. Some of you remember where we came from. The worlds we built in Council space. The lives we had there. I remember too. And I remember how it felt when they told us to leave. I remember thinking that everything we had worked for was lost. The gateway began to hum with power. Energy crackled along its surface, building toward the moment of activation. But it was not lost. Nothing we learned, nothing we experienced, nothing we became was lost. We carried it all with us. We used it to build something new, something better. And now we stand on the edge of wonders that the Council cannot even imagine. The gateway activated. A tunnel of light opened in its center, stable and bright, leading to distances that made the old Council territory look like a backyard. Today, we are not the species that was thrown out of Council space. We are not the people who had to beg for a place among the stars. We are explorers. We are builders. We are humans. And our journey is just beginning. The first ships moved forward, entering the gateway one by one. They carried scientists, settlers, dreamers, people who would build new worlds in a new galaxy. Continuing the story that had started so long ago on a small blue planet called Earth, on a distant moon. The former High Chancellor Vextari watched the broadcast on his communication screen. He saw the gateway. He saw the ships entering it. He saw humanity reaching beyond everything he had ever known. And he wept not tears of anger or jealousy, tears of understanding. Finally, after all these years, he understood what the humans had been all along. Not a problem to be solved, not a threat to be contained, but a force of nature. A species that turned obstacles into opportunities and endings into beginnings. We were blessed, he whispered to the empty room. We had them with us, and we threw them away. That is our shame. That is our punishment. And we will carry it forever. Back in the Council chamber, Linda Hayes prepared to return to Terran space. Zarathil walked with her to the shuttle bay, neither speaking for a long time. Will your people ever forgive us? Zarathil finally asked. Linda thought about it. Really thought about it. Forgiveness is not the right word. We do not hold grudges. That takes too much energy. But we will not forget. We cannot. The memory of what happened keeps us sharp. It reminds us to never depend on anyone else for our place in the universe. That seems lonely. Sometimes it is. Linda stopped at the shuttle door and turned to face Zarathil one last time. But we have each other. We have our families, our communities, our shared purpose. We are not alone. We are just independent. There is a difference. She stepped onto the shuttle. The door began to close. Ambassador, Zarathil called out. For what it is worth, I'm glad your species exists. The galaxy is better because you are in it. Linda smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had shown since returning to council space. Thank you. That means more than you know. The shuttle lifted off, carrying her back to the world she had helped build. Behind her, the council continued its slow decline. Ahead of her, humanity continued its endless expansion. And somewhere in the stars, on a ship passing through the gateway into a new galaxy, a young human child pressed her face against a viewport, watching wonders that her grandparents could never have imagined. Where are we going? She asked her mother. Forward, her mother answered. Always forward. It was the only direction humans knew.